It is said that history repeats itself. The first time it happened was in 1945, when the British were forced to leave India. Or it could be 2022, when people are again asking the British to leave India, but for a different reason. But today, we are going to talk about something in between these two instances. And before we begin our story, a quick favor. Please hit the like button if you've already subscribed and share this video with a friend who can use it to answer the question that their teacher just posed in the class. Now coming back to the topic, for many Indians, freedom means the right to speak freely, the right to choose your leader, it's the right to not follow rules, or maybe having the freedom to watch reels throughout the day. But have you ever thought about what does freedom actually mean? What did India look like before it got its freedom? And how did India get free from the British Raj? Let's find out. The British came to India in the 17th century, and by the beginning of the 19th century, they had established their supremacy over the Indian subcontinent. But at first, they didn't rule directly. Instead, they handed over the responsibility to an agency which would become one of the most powerful corporations in history, the British East India Company. Imagine being paid to loot other countries. Insane, right? That's exactly what the British did. They formed the British East India Company, a private company, which initially was supposed to focus on trade with East Asia, but soon became a tool for the Crown to expand its empire. In 1857, this company was dissolved and the British Crown took charge of the subcontinent, and the era of British Raj began. This wasn't really a good time for the Indians because their natural resources were drained. Their industries were destroyed and they were taxed heavily. In fact, the British introduced the infamous Indigo Revolt to force Indians to grow indigo plants. But Indians weren't the kind to take this lying down. And this brings us to the First War of Independence. It all started with an artillery salute. On May 10, 1857, an order went out from the new military barracks in Meerut. Soldiers were to report to their parade ground at 8 a.m. on the next morning. When they reached the parade ground, they found that their Enfield rifles were greased with the fat of cows and pigs, which was a great problem for Hindus and Muslims because cow slaughter and pork were forbidden in their religions. When they complained, their officers told them to bite the bullet. We guess that's how the phrase originated, so the soldiers rebelled. They killed their officers, and soon the whole city of Meerut was under their control. What followed was a series of battles, sieges, and massacres that lasted for almost 2 years. Although there were several centers of resistance, no single leader or government coordinated them. More importantly, they lacked firearms and ammunition. The British, on the other hand, had a strong centralized government, a big army, and the latest weaponry. So although the rebellion is often called the Sepoy Mutiny, it was anything but a mutiny because it involved civilians too, who participated in mass and fought alongside the soldiers. The rebels even captured Delhi on September 1857, but they couldn't hold it for long. By this time, the British had crushed the rebellion and recaptured Delhi on April 1858. Soon, the rest of the centers of resistance fell, and the war was over. However, this doesn't mean that India was completely under the Crown's control. In fact, the Britishers never really tried to suppress the spirit of the Indians. Instead, they focused on extracting wealth from the country while keeping the power in their hands. So Indians continued to protest, but now they adopted a new strategy: nonviolence and civil disobedience. Enter Mahatma Gandhi. Born on October 2, 1869, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi studied law in London and soon became a prominent lawyer in South Africa. There he realized the importance of unity among different communities and the strength of nonviolent resistance. He returned to India in 1915 and joined the Indian National Congress, or INC. He led several movements against the British Raj. The most important among them was the Salt March, or the Dandi March. As the name suggests, it was a march to the sea. It began on March 12, 1930, and ended on April 5, 1930. During this march, Gandhiji and his 78 carefully selected volunteers walked 390 miles to make salt. Why salt? Because the British had imposed a tax on the manufacture of salt. And by making their own salt, Gandhi and his followers were openly defying the British law. This march turned out to be a mass movement, as more than 2 million Indians joined them and made salt in defiance of the law. This infuriated the British, who arrested Gandhi and his followers. But this only helped the movement because now it spread to other parts of India. The movement continued till the end of 1930, and although it failed to achieve any immediate success, it galvanized the masses. After this, the Second World War broke out, and the British needed all the help they could get. So they promised to grant self-rule to India after the war. But this proved to be another false promise because the British didn't keep their word. Instead, they kept postponing the date for self-rule, and the impatient Indians decided to speed up the process. On August 8, 1942, the All India Congress Committee met in Bombay and passed the Quit India Resolution. It demanded complete independence from the British Raj. On the same day, the Congress leaders, including Gandhi, were arrested. The British only escalated the movement. The resolution reached every nook and corner of the country, and people rose up against the British. Trains were stopped, roads were blocked, government offices were picketed, and strikes became common. People also experimented with other forms of protest. For example, a group of women in Pune organized a parallel government. They elected their own leaders and implemented their own laws. They were called the shadow government. But as they say, every dog has its day. Soon the British authorities cracked down on the protesters and the movement fizzled out. However, the British realized that they could no longer hold on to India, and in June 1947, they announced that they would transfer power to India on June 1948. But the country wouldn't be whole. The British split India into two states, India and Pakistan. India got most of the Hindu-majority areas, and Pakistan got most of the Muslim-majority areas. Even though the division was supposed to be based on religion, it resulted in one of the biggest human migrations in history. More than 14 million people moved from one side of the border to the other. But finally, on August 15, 1947, India became free. And since then, every year on August 15th, we celebrate this day as Independence Day. So the next time someone says that India is not truly free, you'll know what to tell them. Finally, let's meet some of the unsung heroes of this freedom struggle. Subhas Chandra Bose. He didn't agree with Mahatma Gandhi's methods of non-violent resistance. Instead, he wanted a violent revolution to kick out the British. He formed the Forward Bloc and later the Indian National Army to fight against the British. Bhagat Singh. He was a socialist revolutionary who rejected both the British Raj and the dominance of the Indian National Congress. Along with his brother, he assassinated a British official, and when he was arrested, he spent the next 11 years in prison, writing books and essays and inspiring people. Jawaharlal Nehru. He was the first Prime Minister of independent India. He played an important role in shaping the Indian National Congress, and was also the longest-serving president of the Congress. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Tell us in the comments who else contributed to India's freedom struggle. Also, if you liked this video, please hit the like button and share it with a friend. Thanks for watching.